Good morning and welcome everyone to the Wet Weather Working Group, also known as 3WG. We welcome you on this beautiful spring morning. First of all, we'd like you to keep in mind, as you all know, we're a year into this. The best way for us to be able to hear and understand our speakers is for you to be on mute throughout the call. So just keep those mute buttons on unless you would like to ask a question. I recommend the first choice for that, though, to be within the chat box. This just allows us to keep background noise to a minimum. But since this is also a group of friends and colleagues, we do welcome you to unmute if you have a question to interrupt Christian, to get us, slide-specific information that might be really important that everyone might need as well. So that's rule number one of Zooms, right? So the next thing is that we would really enjoy the opportunity to know who's here and who you are. And this comes with a second ask. So the good news about today is that because this is a regional workshop in which we are providing educational materials to you as the experts, we welcome you to have the possibility for continuing education credits. So those PDHs, I guess, require you to have a certificate of proof of attendance. So if you would please put your name as well as that you would like to receive those in the chat box now. Only those that post in the chat box will be receiving the certificate. So if you would like that certificate to be given to you, usually it takes us about a week and a half to turn those around, but we'll send those back to you through email. Drop your name into the chat box now and it'll allow us to, help you accomplish your professional goals, right? So I'm sure like you have been enjoying the beautiful weather. I have been out and about and going on lots of hikes and bike rides. And that came with both some wonderful things and some sad things in the fact that it was wonderful to see the flowers opening and the trees blossoming. And at the same time, I got my very first Alcosan overflow alert this last week. And it was a reminder of why we're all here today and what this committee is all about. It's our responsibility and our goal as the municipal leaders of the region to transition to those beautiful, swimmable, fishable rivers that we're all looking forward to. So we're back into the overflow season, and this committee is the leading body that helps guide us towards the solutions that will accomplish the outcomes we all want. So I welcome you here. And then I also want to make sure we thank Alcosan, who is leading this effort by supporting this committee, as well as supporting their own plan to work towards a better future for our rivers. So the topic for today, we are going to be doing a deep dive into the Three Rivers Wet Weather Sewer Atlas. To truly understand the wet weather issue here in Pennsylvania, and specifically here in the southwestern Pennsylvania region in Allegheny County, and how it affects our entire region, our houses, our businesses, it is important to understand the municipal sewer collection system and how it operates. As a speaker at 3WG said in February, you are unable to manage what you don't know. And although I know that I am only 18 months in here at Three Rivers Wet Weather, the Sewer Atlas was one of the crowning achievements of our region. It is actually unique across the United States in its accomplishment and its abilities for us to see the system. And once we can see the system, we can manage the system. And that is the true power of the Three Rivers Wet Weather Sewer Atlas. And it provides us the ability to explore and interact with the municipal wastewater and stormwater infrastructure data that is all over our Alcosan service region and allows us to be better for it, right? So I'm going to introduce you to someone you already know. You've already heard him speak earlier this year, but I welcome Christian Gass, the COO of Civic Mapper, to present to you today to get us all back up to speed, whether you're new or whether you've been here since the beginning. The Sewer Atlas is a tool maybe we all need a refresher on so we can dig deep in understanding how we can use it, how we can improve it, and what it can do for us right now. So Christian is a full stack geospatial software designer and developer with a background in urban and environmental planning, spatial analysis, and geodesign. And he is an expert in GIS. I look forward to hearing him give you all of the things we need to know about this atlas and really bringing us up to speed. And then following his presentation, I thought the most important thing we need is to always hear from our community voices, from our fellow colleagues. So we're going to have 3 individuals who will speak after Christian and tell us a little bit about how they use how they use the sewer atlas within their own organizations, their municipalities, and how they move forward with that. So Christian, take it away. Thank you so much, Civic Mapper.
All right, thanks Annie for the introduction. Super happy to talk about the Sewer Atlas. It was basically the first project we got to work on with Three Rivers about 6 years ago, and it continues to be something that's really fun to work on, and then also kind of roadmap towards the future.
Christian, I think by accident you went on mute. I don't know how it happened, but just wanted to let you know.
Okay. All right. Can you hear me, Annie?
Yep, I can hear you now.
Sorry about that. So our topics today, using the analogy of flowing downstream. So in this case, we're going from right to left. We're going to talk about the Sewer Atlas. What is it, and why do we have it? Then I'm going to go into that deep dive on actually getting onto it. That means getting access to it through Three Rivers municipal data support site. What you see when you get onto it, what the buttons are, and what you can do with it. And then I'm going to talk a bit about kind of what powers that map, what makes it work, because the map is really only as good as the data that's behind it. And then I'll talk a bit about how you can use that data on your own outside of the web application. And cut off on the left side here is will be that discussion of those end user cases that Annie mentioned. So we're going to cover all of that today. So first off, Sewer Atlas, what is it? Why do we need it? Why do we care about it? Why should we care about it? Fundamentally, it's an interactive web map, just like you've seen anywhere else on the web. They're ubiquitous these days. It's you know, a Google map, except we're showing sewer data on it. Except it's not a Google map. We're using another platform. But hopefully that can sort of illustrate for those new to it what we're getting into here. It shows all the wastewater systems that flow to Alcosan. So that's 82 municipalities worth, more and more kind of individual owners than that. This project actually began close to 20 years ago with the kind of collection and aggregation of the source data, and then the integration of all that into a database. There was a large effort to go out and actually GPS missing parts of the system and create that data. So we came on a little bit later, but we were really standing on the shoulders of giants in that effort and to bring all that together. But why is this important? Yeah, we could put all those layers on a map, but what this database does is actually model connectivity between all those separate systems, which lets you trace from any point in the system up and downstream outside of kind of the individual municipal systems. And that overcomes that unique challenge and situation in the region where we have pretty fragmented municipal government, but we're all sharing the same pipes essentially. That's really the, why do this? Why have a database like this? It's broadly available to municipalities and engineers, so it's not sitting behind anybody's closed door, so to speak. Three Rivers provides access to end users to it. The application that we're going to look at now actually is sort of the second or third evolution of it, and we first published it in 2015. So 6 years is old in software land. The next iteration of the application, actually, we've been funded this year to work on that. So what I'm showing now will still be relevant, but we're going to upgrade things on the back end, and actually in listening to some of the use cases that we've heard over the years, some of the problems that we need to solve or questions we need to answer, those are going to be things we work into this application. So it's generally available at Three Rivers website, their MDS website, and I'll get into that in a second, but I have the URL at the bottom of the screen. If you want to kind of follow along with me, you can head over there now. What I also want to highlight too is that the Sewer Atlas, we talk about it as an app, we talk about it as a database. It's also sort of a process for integrating data and sharing it back out. That's important. So it's not just this kind of static resource you have to go to and you can only look at in one place. It's actually sort of a platform of data, tools, and app and maps that are kind of built for audiences. So that's the Sewer Atlas what and why. Now let's do that deep dive into kind of specifically what can we do with this thing. And what I'm going to attempt to do here is a bit of a live demo to walk you through it. In case that doesn't work, I do have some fallbacks. So let's switch over now to Three Rivers website and we can follow along. So on Three Rivers homepage, threeriverswetweather.org, you can get to the Sewer Atlas by going to their resources button, which you can see up here on the right, top right menu, and then going down to the Municipal Data Support drop-down menu. And when we click through to that, we go to the Municipal Data Support site. Now, if you've never been on here before, to access the resources within this site, you'll actually need to request a login. And what you'll usually see when you need to do that is this Create Account button up at the very top. And that'll actually take you to a form where you enter some information. And then what you need to do is check that you want requests to that Municipal Data Support System on that form. And the group at Three Rivers will may be in touch about how you need to use it. They may know you may have talked to them ahead of time, but generally after that point, you'll get access and you'll be able to log in through the system. Once you're logged in, you can access any of these resources, but the Sewer Atlas itself is under this Regional Sewer Infrastructure Atlas tab, and there are two links below. Go to the Three Rivers Sewer Atlas is the first one, and that's the one we'll head to. When you're on the Sewer Atlas, the first thing you'll see is a nice big explanation of what you're looking at here. We provide some information too, just some prompts about the data update cycle right there for informational. And I'll talk a little bit about that later on in the presentation. I'm not going to talk much about stormwater here today, but it also provides an FYI that's something we're also working on integrating into the data set. So we have that notice here as well. Additionally, there's a link right here to the help documentation and an email address for support requests. Once you click away that screen, you're presented with the map, and it, as I mentioned, it's a web map. So if you're on a computer, what you can do is drag the map around to move it. Plus and minus buttons will let you zoom in, but if you have a scroll wheel on your mouse too, or if you're on tablet, you can use those interfaces to actually zoom in and out. As you zoom in too, you'll get more detail. Right now, we only see some types of sewer structures. Those big green circles are outfalls. But as you go way in, you'll start to see manholes and other structures. You actually see virtual laterals and other things. So there's a lot on this map, and on the left side of the screen, what you can do is open up a legend to see what kind of data we're looking at. This legend updates dynamically based on what is on the screen. So if you can't see it on the map, it won't show on the legend until you see there. That just keeps things kind of neat and clean. But as you scroll down here, we can look at and get a sense of what we're looking at. Because it's a web app, we kind of design it for simplicity and visual impact, the cartography that is. So we make the big pipes big fat lines and the little pipes, little skinny lines. Where we don't know things, we kind of dot them out. So you'll see this unknown width. There are a lot more deeper attributes on any given kind of feature within the Sewer Atlas. So you can click on these things and it'll pull up kind of the core attributes for any given piece of infrastructure. On pipes, right, we'll show you the point of connection that pipe is actually linked to, who owns the pipe, the Alcosan basin that it's in, the analysis basin, and then some physical characteristics like diameter. It's kind of as-built length or calculated length, depending on what we have, materials, shapes, and some other things like inverts if they're available. Not everything's available. This particular pipe that I randomly selected is pretty good. The sewer infrastructure layers themselves aren't the only things we could show on the map. So on the left panel here, this info box, we have a layer list. And actually by default, we're only showing a few things on this map. The Alcosan surface area, which if we zoom out, we can see it as this big teal boundary, and the actual sewer layers themselves. In addition to that, we have municipal boundaries that you can bring in, and you can see things do start to get cluttered once you work on this. One thing I want to highlight is that with any of these layers, you actually have the option to control them. We have some defaults set on things like transparency, but if you need to make things pop, you have that capability. If you actually want to reorder this list, you can do that just with these move up and move down buttons. There's also some other kind of shortcut options like zoom to, and that'll take you to the full extent of the layer. If we look at, say, the sewer pipes layer too, I want to highlight this specifically. There's also a view attribute table button. And this is where you can start to really dig into what is on the map. So every layer in a GIS you can think of as a table, almost even like an Excel table if that is helpful. It's a table in a database. Every column is an attribute, every row is a record, and we can start to look at some of these things here in the Sewer Atlas. There's a little tab here that you'll see on the Sewer Atlas, and we call this a drawer. It reveals that attribute table, and you can take a look at all the available attributes here as well. If you need to actually filter records, you can do that here. This gets a little more in depth than I think I want to get in this presentation, but we do document this in the help, which I'll show a little later. You can click through and see other layers that are in the map here, but usually it's just a little easier to work through what you want to see in this table of contents. Additionally to the sewer infrastructure, we have flow monitors. Now this is 2008 flow monitor data points at this point. Those will show up on the map here too. We have an intermittently updated Alcosan sewer shed areas layer as well, which is useful for a point of reference, though I like to emphasize with any of these external layers, check with the source, the people who actually maintain it. Use the Sewer Atlas as kind of that point of reference or a jumping off point for the deeper dives. But what the sewer sheds layer shows us is actually our combined sewer area, anywhere that's not sewer that runs off towards the combined area, and our separate areas, as well as non-contributing, which is basically the areas that are empty on the map. So that's our layer list. And this is really kind of just the basic way you can get to data on the map. You can explore it, and poke around, and that'll get you so far. It's interesting to look around and see, but if you actually need to answer a question, there's some other tools to help you do that. The first one I want to highlight is actually the search button up at the top. This is what I'd call a global search. We can look up addresses, and what it'll do is kind of type ahead and let you pick matching address from a drop-down menu. What we can also do is look up sewer structure IDs or pipe IDs if you know them. So if we wanted to look up, say, the M51 point of connection, what we'll do is it'll end up on that list. And we can actually scroll down. The way this works currently is that addresses that might match always show up at the top. In which case M51 gives us some weird things, but closer to the bottom, you can get to actual matching sewer structures. And by clicking on that, it'll take us to it. This specifically is an M51 upstream manhole. So if we zoom out a little on our map, we can actually see the outfall here. We can see this big pipe going from southeast to northwest is our Alxan interceptor. And that's that. So this is how we can get to locations we are interested in more quickly. That's all well and good. What really makes this powerful, I mentioned earlier, is that ability to trace kind of in an intermunicipal way. So up on the left side at the top again is our network trace tool. Let's just close that out. What this lets you do is drop a flag on the map. And I'd recommend when you do this, you actually drop it near a point. And we'll drop ours right on the overflow here, or the outfall. Once you do that, it puts this little target down, and then you can hit the trace button. Now traces, it varies how long it'll take to come back. It's usually less than a minute. Most of that time is actually spent transforming the data from how it's stored in a local coordinate system into a format that we can use for display on the web. But there it is, and that actually came back nice and quick. What we get on the map now, it'll load this automatically for you, are a highlight of all the pipes that are upstream and any that are downstream, because I traced from an outfall. We're only actually showing as downstream the outfall itself. If I had traced from somewhere else in the system, it would show a path all the way through it. I can do that in a second, actually. What I do want to highlight here is we get some summary statistics out of that trace. Upstream will show number of structures, total length of all pipe, and a rough estimate of inch miles based on available data. So if we don't have widths, which is the thing that was most likely going to be missing, because we can always calculate length from the GIS, those won't be included here. But generally our coverage on that sort of thing is pretty good. Downstream, you'll get the same statistics. So you get that at a glance capacity and kind of system size from those summary statistics. Additionally, here it actually gives us a way to look at everything that's been traced. So if we click on any of these headings here, upstream and downstream, it gives us kind of a random and unordered list. This may be more useful with smaller traces. You can click through on any of these and it'll take you to that specific piece of infrastructure. I'm going to let you work through. This isn't in trace order, which isn't helpful in the future, and that's something we've been talking about for a while, is actually getting that data back out in some kind of something more closely resembling down to upstream order. If we go back to the other thing we can do here is actually export our results to a table for analysis outside of the Sewer Atlas. And this is kind of the first step in using Sewer Atlas data beyond the web app. If we click that export to CSV button, we can select which layer we're interested in downloading, check it, and then hit the OK button. That will pop a CSV up almost immediately. That'll download and we can open it straight away. This is just tabular data. It does not include the geometry. In a little bit, I'll talk about how you can get the actual data in the for the entire Sewer Atlas. What you would do then is use this to join it up to the map if you wanted to actually map those traces using this method. That's the trace actually kind of in its entirety. You can run additional traces. You can actually plan as many flags as you want if you need to run multiple traces. It'll all come back. All the results will come back as kind of one big record set. but if you need to do a few at a time, that is possible. So I'll just run another one here. Let's see what happens when we go downstream, get a good view of that. While we're waiting for that, I'm just going to switch to another screen here and show you another set of functionality as well. So at the top of our menu, we have this query tool here. And what that lets us do is run some predefined kind of filtering tasks you think of. It'll pull out specific records from the sewer atlas by either point of connection or owner or basin. And this is really flexible. We can make these pretty complex. You can think of it as chaining together. I want to find pipes that have attribute X or Y or widths within range, N to M, whatever you can really think up. It's possible to implement here. Right now, we just have these three. And what it'll actually do is let us, in this case, look at all of the pipes that don't have owner information included on them. So in this case, I'm showing kind of a QA/QC type of question and answer scenario. Let's just go back and check on those trace results here. And yep, there we go. So in this case, the trace ran. We got our kind of similar upstream catchment, and then this green line running here is our downstream result all the way to the plant. We'll run a filter here too dynamically just to show you what we can do. So I'm clicking that filter screen. I'm going to click highlight by owners, and then I can pick an owner from a drop-down list. And we can go to really anything randomly here. Run this. Right now too, I just want to mention that it's showing the owner codes, and in the future that'll show the entire owner name in kind of human legible format. One other thing to note here is legibility. I showed you how to change layers. Our result is actually showing up here, but it's a little hard to see. We can change the base map too that shows up in the background. Sometimes the imagery isn't as useful when you want to look at this stuff. There's a whole gallery of base maps. This comes from the Esri platform, so I realize a lot of these are probably less than useful. But generally, the kind of dark or light versions are good for making your data really pop. And if we just want to actually show our results and only our results here, we can turn off some other layers too. So we go back to that highlight by result. You'll note too that this is it'll only display things in chunks. You can get the whole thing to display, but by default, it'll show 1,000 features at a time. And it indicates how many are shown on the map at once. To show more, you'll keep scrolling, it'll load the next batch, and it'll put those on the map. Of course, the more you put on the map, that can affect performance and other things too. What's nice about the filter feature, whereas the trace provided just a table out, we can actually get through the drop down up here with the results, the ability to export to CSV, but also to actual layers for use in GIS or even CAD software. So feature collection is Esri's layer format, and GeoJSON's a more generic layer format, and we can bring those out and then load those things into our own software for further analysis. Let's say too that you've worked through some traces or some filtering, and now you just need to make a quick map. That's why you came here. It wasn't to kind of poke around or explore, but you just needed to be able to show someone some information. I'll do this where we have a trace, because it's a little more interesting. Up in the right-hand corner, we have a print option. And when clicking on that, it'll let you set up some kind of very simple defaults. What's the title of your map? What's the size here? And letter is, what you typically is probably actually the best format for most of these. That's your kind of horizontal orientation. And then format, we can do images or even PDFs here. If you need more control over that, there's an advanced button. But for a quick map, this usually works pretty nicely. Now what this will do is grab the layers that are on your screen kind of as is, and it'll also bring in that legend. When it's done, it's done. We can open it up here and we've got our map. Not a great map. In fact, this one didn't actually look like it downloaded the layers. That's something we can, we'll obviously look into fixing. Printing we found is occasionally finicky for whatever reason. In any case, that option is there for you to make quick maps for distribution. Now I'm dumping a lot of information on you, and you're probably thinking I might not be able to remember this unless I'm on here all the time. So what we have up on the top right hand side is help documentation, a link to it in any case. It says help. That'll take you to an external site. It's still on MDS, Three Rivers MDS site, that has both an kind of the general introduction to the interface that I've provided, but also some walkthroughs of common tasks. And so if you scroll down here, there's some quick links to show you. You can also access links from the documentation menu at the top of the page. So if we go to interface, just to show you, we describe again kind of the basic layout of the Sewer Atlas, where things are, what they do. There's measuring too, which I didn't get into, but we also have the ability to kind of measure on screen. Again, showing that information window and what you see and what things are available, including the base map gallery and other things. For the common tasks, again, this is kind of taking it to the next step. When you click on the buttons, what can you do? Or I need to do this thing. This is where you can go there. We have right now one example of a kind of workflow guide, and we can implement as many of these as we need. This one we developed specifically for Alcosan's Industrial Waste Department back in 2016 or so. They were using the Sewer Atlas to kind of investigate upstream potential kind of illegal dumping or other spills and odors and that sort of thing. So we created a walkthrough guide for how you use this tool set to do that kind of work, and kind of recycle some material here. But if there is a need or a desire for a specific workflow that we can accommodate in the Sewer Atlas, or even if it includes, using external tools to do further analysis, we can document that here. We are totally happy to do that. So I'm just going to switch back to my presentation here real quick and skip through my backup slides and talk about what's really important. That sort of concludes my deep dive into the Sewer Atlas, the web interface itself, and I encourage you all to kind of get in there and play around and use it as much as possible, and also try to break it, because we're always looking for feedback. Also tell us what you wish you could do with it, because we have an ever-growing list of things that we want to do with the next iteration, and so we're happy to hear about things we're hoping to accomplish with the map. But that map is really only as good as the data that goes into it. I want to talk a little bit about how we do that. In general, when you want to, we have some resources actually published about this stuff, and you can get to it from the Sewer Atlas itself. Up on that menu at the top, that help documentation, we also have our data change log, and that will tell you about every kind of set of data releases that we've performed since we started doing the updates in 2017. On the left side of the Sewer Atlas, you'll see this little tag which tells you what data release is currently on the map. Again, this is just highlighting that help documentation again. The data menu at the top of that screen, and why don't I just switch back to it, shows us a few things. 1, how we can download data. 2, that change log I mentioned. And 3, an overview of kind of how we edit and QA, QC the data. So the map's only as good as the data on it. How do we make sure that the map is as good as it can be? How are we continuing to kind of make sure it's as good as it can be? Generally, our focus has been on when we bring in new data to update the map. Our focus is on updating location, because very often some of the stuff we get in is of higher geospatial accuracy than the stuff that was originally added. We make sure we're doing that, and then making sure we're bringing over any of those core attributes, the ones I showed in that map pop-up, like the dimensionality or owner, kind of other metadata like that. We're making sure we're bringing over all that information, and this is the important part, while maintaining that overall network connectivity, because that's what the Sewer Atlas is all about. It's about maintaining that connectivity across municipal boundaries. When we're doing this, we automate as much as we can automate in the process. So we have routines, conflation routines that'll bring in attributes from source municipal layers into the Sewer Atlas, kind of as we align them together. But I want to emphasize too that this whole process has a lot of human touch through it. So we're always checking it. We're never just letting the computer try to figure everything out. When we do our edits too, when this data is brought in, our kind of guiding philosophy is that we trust the data source maintainers, the engineers and the municipalities that have to maintain this data. We're kind of relying on it to be accurate, and we're usually not looking to dispute it. So we want to bring it in when we have questions, because there's always questions. We have sort of a stepwise kind of data conflict resolution process, which sounds more kind of daunting than it is, but it's really just stepwise. Okay, if these two things don't line up, by default, which do we trust first? At what point do we go back to the data source maintainer and bug them to try to figure it out? And that's one thing we do. We've worked with a few engineering firms in the region to just kind of work through some questions we had, where either their data and what was in the Sewer Atlas were wildly different, and sometimes that's just because the new data is better, or because the infrastructure's actually changed, and we have to tease out kind of those cases, because the change we get, it could be either in two buckets. It's either better data or it's reflecting real changes on the ground. So we have kind of a stepwise data conflict resolution process to work through those changes. The other thing we do is when we have identified the issues, we track them. We don't track them in the records of the infrastructure themselves. We track them in some separate layers that lets us kind of work through and log how we've resolved the issues iteratively. It's important that we do this because the Sewer Atlas it's really a living data set. I think we've got 20 or so, not 20, probably a dozen data releases that we've done since 2017. We're constantly working to improve it, both the accuracy but also the completeness of the data set. And occasionally we encounter these issues. So currently we track these things internally, from the identification of them to information we receive to the decision that was made to resolve it. In the future, that's something we definitely want to have on the Sewer Atlas itself. So if you have access to the Sewer Atlas, you'll also be able to submit those issues. I think very early on when we developed the Sewer Atlas, we had kind of a notes feature. It wasn't well used. It was pretty clunky to use, in fact. But this year we're looking to roll out a more robust and open way to track this. And this data is fed back to Three Rivers so they can see where things are, to Alcosan so they can see, again, where things are, kind of as the editing progresses. One thing to note here too is that while we can usually end up resolving a lot of these things, and what's great about working with the engineers is they often know the answer right off the top of their head. They can test, they know the data so well, which is why we want to trust them all the time when this data comes in, and we love working with them on this stuff. Usually we're able to resolve these things very quickly. Other things, there's just a need for more information, and we'll kind of track those as pending. And in some cases, we have to defer resolution of those issues because occasionally the answer just isn't no. One of our first rounds of edits, we dealt with a situation where the data that was coming in had one owner listed for the pipe and another owner listed for the manhole. And the engineer then couldn't really explain that. And it's an issue we'd love to get an answer to, but it's not something that would keep us from actually publishing the rest of the updates, right? So as long as we're logging these things and we kind of can also publicize where we know there might be challenges, we're going to do that. So I've talked over kind of a process of bringing in data from the source and then getting it on the map, but I just want to show kind of diagrammatically how that really works. On screen, we really have kind of those three sources of data. We have sort of Alcasan's regionalization infrastructure, which is the trunk of the tree, literally and figuratively in our workflow. We have submissions from municipal data maintainers, which is we bring in batches. Sometimes we'll do 2 or 3 municipalities at a time. Usually if those data sets follow the same data model, we can do it all at once. It just depends how we kind of work through those or batch that work. And then additionally, we have issues that are brought to us in between our published data releases. So all those things come in to what is really an iterative editing process. It's iterative because we will essentially complete the system, do a bunch of post-processing on it to kind of what we do is clean up the attributes, do some of that conflation work. And then we'll check network connectivity from Alcasan all the way out to identify any issues, any misses, and then we'll kind of drill back in. So we'll go out and in to work through those edits. Part of this, if we need to, is our discussions with the data maintainers. We'll go back to them when we can, and then note any other issues we might have. We're doing all that within the context of a geodatabase. It's an Esri ArcGIS platform that we're using. We manage it on behalf of Three Rivers Wet Weather through a company called RockTech, which just manages the infrastructure for us. So we ensure we have that uptime. And we're actually editing on a kind of side-by-side copy of the database that eventually gets to the map. So once everything's resolved and published, this stuff goes everywhere, not just to the Sewer Atlas, but it goes to a lot of places. At the top right of the screen here, we have our Three Rivers Municipal Data Support site and the Sewer Atlas, which is what you've just seen. But there's also a data downloads page where you can get to the raw publications of the data. Additionally, we have ArcGIS Online, and I'll show that in a minute, and also 2 outreach apps, Flush It and Follow the Flush. We're also working now to get the data into Alcasan's Info Asset Manager system, and that's ongoing. So I've shown you the data, and we've talked about how it's updated. Where is it actually at? We do get this question a bit. We started doing edits in Q2 of 2017. The areas in blue on this map are where we've actually done complete edits. And in our last round, we also did all the Alcasan RI data that's been collected over the last few years. It's important to note that the areas in gray on this map are vintage 2011, which was the source data we got in 2015. What's also important to note is that this year we're funded to update everything, and that's going to be great. This map will all be blue September timeframe. Again, you can get to kind of a summary of our edits, and we'll continue to maintain this on that changelog page. We can also get to, on that documents page, a description of where to go get and download that data. So I'll switch back to the screen here and go back to our municipal data support website. Let's just get to there. So if you're on that site again and logged in, we can go to File Transfer. It'll prompt you for a login. And there's this download data button. And when you click on that, what you'll get here are links to both the download of the Sewer Atlas in Esri geodatabase form. What's nice about that is that all the attributes have their labels. So instead of seeing, say, MH for manhole, you actually see the word manhole on a pipe or on a structure, for example. This also gets you the full network topology. It's traceable if you're using ArcMap. We also provide the shapefile because not everybody can use that geodatabase, and this will load in really anything. It's a little more raw, though. Those attributes are coded, and the network topology, though it's technically maintained, the actual intelligence isn't built into that shapefile just because of that format. So beyond the Sewer Atlas, I've just walked through a little bit of how do we get that data. You can get it on MDS, but we can also get it on ArcGIS Online. So if any municipalities or firms that are maintaining the data have access to ArcGIS Online, we can get you there to see that. So I've walked through this. Won't belabor that. What's nice about ArcGIS Online is that once we invite you to the Municipal Data Support Group in Three Rivers ArcGIS Online, you can actually use those layers in your own ArcGIS Online maps or even in ArcMap. You can also, through this, use the trace toolbox, the actual trace tool that we expose in the Sewer Atlas. You can use it on the desktop and then get those results right there. I'm not actually sure if anyone is doing that but us, but that's whenever we have to answer questions for Three Rivers, that's usually what we're doing. We're not going to the Sewer Atlas, we're using the tools that's exposed through ArcGIS Online in our desktop software. The downloads are also provided on ArcGIS Online too, the same ones I showed on MDS, and those live layers are there. There's some options you walk through, and I'm going a little fast here because I realize we have some folks who we want to talk to about how they use the system. But in ArcGIS Online, you can open these resources in ArcMap. And once you do that, things can get pretty fun. So I'll just show kind of something we worked on recently was just some analysis from points of connections where we brought in trace results, and you can get as sophisticated as you want with some of this stuff. You can use geoprocessing tools off the shelf. We ended up writing a Jupyter notebook just to do some of this analysis, which is Python code where we were iterating through features, tagging them, running some calculations, doing reprojections on the fly, just to help give us some kind of summary statistics about pipes upstream of point of connections. You can do that too with the tools and the data we're making available. The last thing I want to talk about for how to use the Sewer Atlas is how to use it for outreach. And the catch is you don't actually use the Sewer Atlas for outreach. We have some other public-facing apps, though I guess you can. You can always show it. But if you want to send folks a link, if you want to educate folks on how the system is working, we have a kind of double-headed web application called Flush It or Follow the Flush, depending on where you access it at. And what that lets folks do is enter an address and trace downstream and see what's going on. So Flush It is this kind of night mode map, and it's available on Three Rivers website. Follow the Flush is an Alcosan branded version of the same exact application, and that is visible on Alcosan's website. What's interesting about this is that we try to provide people with a sense of scale. Flush It and Follow the Flush both will summarize how far people's flushes go. So it does the downstream trace. It doesn't do the upstream. And it talks about how far and how long it takes for your flush to get to the plant, and even what other municipalities or neighborhoods your flush is passing under. Most people get a kick out of that. While it's tracing, it'll also spins up some fun facts about treatment and wastewater in general. So those tools you can get to from Three Rivers website, and they're pretty fun and easy to use. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Annie and our other guests to talk about how they use the Sewer Atlas.
Thanks so much, Christian. I sincerely appreciated that walkthrough. That was very in-depth. You have a lot of cool fans in the comment box, specifically Sam. So if you want to jump on the chat box and answer some of those. But we're going to move to some of our community voices. Just to reiterate, though, the Sewer Atlas was the basis, for example, when we're talking about the 2008 flow monitors. This is where Exhibit B came from. This is how we were able to then reclassify communities for majority, minority, contributing. So, you know, this map has been the basis of a lot of work, specifically for me while here, as well as for you moving forward. So I am going to turn it over to our first community voice. We're going to have Robert Herring. He is the project manager at the Pittsburgh Water and Sewer Authority within the Department of Engineering and Construction. In this role, Rob manages sewer-related projects, including the Alkazan regionalization efforts, and assists with development services. So Rob, just tell us about how you use the Civic or the Sewer Atlas, please.
Yeah, thanks, Ann. Thanks for the opportunity to speak. And Christian, thank you for that presentation. I think I probably got nominated because of all the emails I've been sending you in the past, Christian, about the Sewer Atlas. So
That's correct.
I appreciate the opportunity to talk. Yeah, as Ann indicated, I'm a project manager at PWSA. PWSA, we have our own GIS department. We have our own web map that we use. And that's kind of our principal go-to resource in terms of goings-ons in our service area. Where the Sewer Atlas really comes into play for us is when we start talking about multi-municipal issues. So I think that's kind of been the theme of what Christian was talking about, how we all are kind of related. And it's really, the Sewer Atlas is a primary resource that we use when we're reviewing. It's a DEP permit called Sewage Facilities Planning Modules. We get a lot of these permit applications. It's a DEP permit. It acts as an amendment to the official sewage plan. And we get a lot of them because since PWSA is in violation of the Clean Water Act, we're not eligible for certain exemptions to the permit. So what we find is a lot of developers and developments in our service area trigger the requirements to have to do this official amendment of the sewage plan. And what that permit requires us to do as the collection system owner is to analyze the most limited capacity sewer segment between a point of connection from a new development all the way to Alkazan's interceptor sewer. So where we really use the Sewer Atlas a lot is the trace feature. So if we know where they're going to connect, we do a trace and we can kind of see where their flow is going to go. And then we kind of hop around through the features going downstream, and you get sewer diameters, inverts, slopes, all that kind of good stuff. So we can kind of do a kind of basic hydraulic analysis of the flow path. And with that, we can identify what the most limited capacity sewer is, and then the developer knows what they need to analyze in order to get our approval on that permit. Yeah, like Christian was saying before, we kind of found it easiest to I think the Sewer Atlas is best when you're on the map and clicking through features. We've tried to implement ways to download the data set, but because it doesn't download in the order of the flow path, sometimes it's more work to organize the data how you want it rather than just manually clicking through, especially when you're looking at flow paths. And it's not a big deal, but I am encouraged to hear that that's kind of on the plate in terms of still looking at organizing the downloaded data set in accordance with the flow path. Yeah, so we use it a bunch for that. I mean, like I said, that's the primary resource. We use that even before our own our GIS system, just because of that flow path capability, and also just the invert information on there as well, super helpful. The second way we use it and this has kind of been recently, but with all the Alcosan regionalization efforts, obviously Alcosan's done investigations into all these POCs surrounding Pittsburgh, and I've found we've been going to the sewer atlas here and there, just where those interconnects are between our system and neighboring municipalities. And in this case, we're kind of using as a secondary resource, comparing it to our GIS system. But we're just making sure that the defects that are in our system and that we own, that we're responsible for, are kind of accounted for, and just confirming where that transition of responsibility is with neighboring municipalities. So as we've kind of been ramping up those efforts internally at PWSA, we've been accessing the sewer atlas to confirm spots here and there.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that. I sincerely appreciate it. Now I want to flip to Kelly Harrington. She is a gateway engineer in training. She graduated from Penn State and works with lots of municipality and residential commercial development. And I'd love to hear how she uses the sewer atlas.
Thanks, Annie. So my use of the sewer atlas is primarily for supporting new developments or building renovations, usually within the city of Pittsburgh limits, but I've also done others within the Alcosan sewer shed. My team that I'm supporting is usually for an architect or a developer, and the majority of the projects involve some sort of
Oh no, Kelly, did we lose you? Oh, we lost you for a minute. You're back now.
Oh.
You're back.
Okay, so usually the projects I support are for utility coordination and sanitary and storm laterals, as well as the sewage planning process, which Rob had mentioned. So I found recently one of the ways the sewer atlas helped us was just having that map directly at our fingertips and not having that extra step of reaching out to an authority or a municipality. We're quickly able to identify issues that could be occurring at a project site. For example, we recently had a project, even in the proposal phase, we identified there was an existing sewer that was going under an existing building that we were going to demolish and put in an apartment building. So since we were able to identify that early on, we were able to include that within our proposal and just make the architect and developer aware of that up front. And that really allowed us to have a good conversation at the start with PWSA regarding what we would need to do to relocate that sewer. So that was one of the most recent benefits that I found from the sewer atlas. So then during our design phase and our coordination, for me, it's usually with PWSA. The sewer atlas gives us a more direct line of communication with PWSA because we see what they see. So when we go into our initial pre-development meeting with them, we already have an idea of what sewers are in our area, what we can connect to, the size and the material. So it just makes for a more effective conversation, and it just saves time for everyone because you don't have to call, you don't have to email PWSA and ask 5 people, where are we going through, what municipalities do we flow through? We can see that right there. So I think that time-saving technique has really been kind of my biggest thing, and I think like PWSA probably feels the same way. So then I also found too, when we need to coordinate our sewer monitoring in order to complete the sewage planning module, having the manhole identifiers be consistent for us to see, for PWSA to see, and for our consultant who's doing the flow monitoring to see, it just provides a consistent process for everyone to know the location we need to test, know what manholes we're looking at, and really reduces the errors or miscommunication that you can see. So then the last way, which this kind of goes piggybacks off of what Rob said, I do a lot of the sewage facilities planning modules, and the sewer atlas is a big benefit because you need to submit a map as part of your project narrative. So having that tracing tool and having it right at your fingertips, you can produce a clean map, identify where the Alcosan treatment plant is, what your interceptor sewers are, as well as the size of your sewer that you're tapping into. So that tracing tool has been a big help on that aspect. And having that interceptor information is beneficial too. because we need to provide that for our planning modules, and we don't have to reach out to anyone else or go through folks to kind of get that information. And I think for everyone, that's definitely a big benefit, having it at all of our fingertips so we can all see the same information. So those are really the main ways that I find benefit in the Sewer Atlas.
Thank you so much, Kelly. And then our last community voice will be Dennis. So Dennis Flynn is a project manager at Gateway Engineers. He's been there for 14 years, graduated Youngstown State University Civil Engineering, and he's been working with municipal managers for a while and us throughout the Exhibit B process. So Dennis, how do you use the Civic Mappers, Three Rivers Wet Weather, Sewer Atlas?
Yes, thank you, Annie. And thank you, Christian. That was a very good presentation. Yeah, we, as Kelly mentioned, obviously we use it a number of ways. And after Christian's presentation, I realized that there's probably a number of other ways that we could be utilizing it even further. But to speak more so on how we use it on the municipal side and with our municipalities, as Rob mentioned, you know, we would also have GIS for each of our municipalities, but where it really comes into play is in the multi-municipal efforts for regionalization or just for larger scale projects. For instance, we recently had in Churchill, a pump station in Churchill, which was antiquated and needed to be replaced. We ended up working with them and found a solution through the old Churchill Country Club property to provide a gravity sewer where we are entirely switching points of connection, leaving the M47 point of connection, which was over capacity, and moving into another point of connection with a little bit more capacity. So that was something where we were able to use the tool to better understand and analyze how we were affecting the different points of connection, and ultimately worked with Alcosan to get an Alcosan Grow Grant as part of that project as well. So that's one big feature in that sense. And as has been mentioned, just kind of working through and understanding who else you're dealing with as you're looking at specific municipal flows. And then, as we know, the new consent order is expected any day now or any time now. And as we've been preparing for that, one of the main features has been taking a look at the gold line standards, the Exhibit B. Annie, as you mentioned, we've been working with you back and forth a lot on that and better understanding where each of our municipalities stand in terms of that gold line standard expectations. And that's in reference back to the 2008 meter data. But also, as you go to look at it, as we're setting up new meter programs, it's very useful. And that's where we use that trace feature quite often in, trying to understand new net meter sheds and understanding specific requirements and how the municipality stands in a greater point of connection. But yeah, I think a lot of people have touched on a lot of the great points, but yeah, it's been an invaluable tool and one that we use regularly and expect to use even more as these new consent orders come out.
Awesome. Thank you, you three. And I sincerely appreciate that. And none of them were paid to say they enjoy using our Sewer Atlas. Honestly, there is a lot of opportunity here from you get a resident in your municipality as a municipal manager and they're having a backup, showing them a map, trace of what's upstream of them and saying, where is this all coming from, to the flush it at for outreach, which we all know is in our 9 minimum controls, a requirement. We have to do outreach. We have to be talking to our citizens, teaching them, elevating them. I don't know, because of time, if Dave, you want to still jump on. As Christian mentioned, we are looking to do an update to the system, and Dave will tell a little bit more about that.
Yeah, thanks, Annie, and thanks to all of our presenters and comments. One of the, Christian has highlighted several times during his talk about we're going to upgrade this year the system where we've been funded. Well, special thanks to Alcosan. They are providing the funding for us to be able to do that. that upgrade wouldn't be able to happen without Al-Qasam's funding. So I thank them for that. And just briefly, I know everybody wants to go. The information that you provide to Al-Qasam is provided to us to put into this system, and that allows us to do the upgrade. And as Christian said, it will be back and forth with you. So it is a great tool. In my 30-some years experience, I never used it that much until I do now in my new position, but it is really good, and I think we can build even more on it. We're looking for your suggestions. I saw Sam had quite a couple comments in the, I don't want to say quite a few, but Sam was paying attention and making some good suggestions. So I think in a matter of time, we will get back to everybody with some of the comments and how we can do it. And, you know, so just make sure you provide the most up-to-date information you can to Al-Qasam. We're all in this together. And what I heard about this is really a good way that we work as a region. And we know as a region, if we don't work as a region, we won't solve this problem. And this allows us to better access across municipal boundaries. And some of the things I noted when I was going through it is we'll work with civic mappers to maybe put together little bullet points and said, do you know that the system can do this? Do you know the system can do that? And so we're going to come up with different ideas, different ways we can expand it. And so that's where we're at with Civic Mapper. As to these meetings that we have, you know, we're going to have some subcommittee meetings coming up on the 15th. The first one is going to be how we think we need to process through the separate the orders for separate systems and combined systems and how the group wants to do. These are your meetings. We are the facilitator. We want to give you the content that you want. Please send us an email. Annie did a great job putting this together. She does a fantastic job for us here trying to put all these together, but it's your ideas you want. We brainstorm in ours. Some of these ideas, other ideas will come from you, and that's what we want. I wished I had some news I could tell you about the agreements that are coming out. I was hoping we'd be able to say they were here. We got a little bogged down on the combined SOAR order as it was to the attachment. We're working through that and hope to hear any day back from DEP, but you know how that process goes. And it's not for not us trying. We are really trying, and that is a great effort for us. But so that's the end that I have for today, and I hope to see a lot of you at the next subcommittee meeting so we can start the process. And again, special thanks to Al-Qasam for all the funding that they give us to make all these things happen.
Thanks, Dave. Yeah, so just to reiterate, next week on the 15th, there will be a 9 a.m. meeting of the combined sewer systems. At 10 o'clock, there'll be a subcommittee of the separate sewer systems. But for those of you still on the line, and there are quite a few of you, I now want to open it up for questions. So this is an opportunity for, if you have the time and the ability, you have Civic Mapper's attention, you have my attention, and we welcome you to ask us the questions and really dig in. Otherwise, if you would like to hop off, I just want to thank you for a spectacular 3WG, and we look forward to seeing you again next month. Sam, go ahead. I see you, you're on video, so jump on in. What's some of your questions and comments?
No, I don't have a question. I was just saying bye, thanks, good presentation.
That's fine too. We have your comments in the chat, and for the rest of you, if you're feeling shy, feel free to send those us by email and or reach out to us directly. We want to make this the tool that works for our region and brings us to the next stage of phase 2 consent order accomplishments. And as I started, with beautiful, clean rivers. So
Yes.
any other questions? Feel free to unmute.
Look forward to seeing emails from us that answer some of the questions in the chat so that we can maybe give you a little more detail on how to do it. Thank you.
Christian, oh, I see a hand up. I think someone raised their hand. Let's see, Benjamin, go ahead, unmute, ask your question.
Hi, yeah, Ben Reynolds with Alcosan. I just have a simple question on the Atlas through the MDS. Where are you pulling the point of connection points, that data from? Where is that coming from?
So that is actually a separate layer, and it's pretty old actually. So we have those attributes in the latest Alcosan RI data. The layer that's currently shown on the map, though, is a few years old, so it doesn't actually line up with it. That's one of the things on our to-do list, is to basically switch the source of the layer that's shown on the map.
Great, understood. Thank you.
All right, I see your hands raised. Dennis, jump on in.
Hi, I did have a question I was going to ask Christian as well. One thing that we've seen as we go to utilize that trace tool, is there any way to incorporate the virtual sewer laterals within that trace tool so that we could better estimate EDUs upstream of a point?
Yeah, that's totally possible. So actually, that's one thing I didn't highlight in the presentation, is that virtual laterals layer. And the way we generate that is we actually take centroids of building footprint data from Allegheny County and then find the nearest pipe. And sometimes that's a good approximation. Sometimes it's a terrible approximation of where they might be connected.
Silly, yes.
Sometimes there's places in the strip that look like they drain to places in the hill. So that's not correct. So it's possible for sure to include that as part of the network. I think it would have to be a switch, right? We don't want to always bring those back. Plus, it's a lot more geometry to serve up.
Okay, yeah, no, that's, and I get that a lot of that would just be an estimate at that point, because, and we do have some municipalities where they have asked us to try to better identify that. And we've used televising, and I guess that was the other point of whether or not that information would be useful to you as well. We do have some, lateral layers within some of our municipalities that would be a little bit, have gone through that process to vet those and verify those.
Yeah, we'll take whatever you can send. And actually, some of the data that we haven't incorporated yet, does have the lateral layers. So we haven't officially pulled it in. We're still just showing the virtual ones, and whether we make that part of the kind of core pipe set or keep it as a separate layer is something we've been debating. But yeah, those are all points well taken.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't see any other hands raised. So I am going to assume that everyone feels as though they are experts and ready to rock and roll. The last thing I'll say is, if you have trouble getting to MDS, just reach out to us. We do clean the system out for old usernames. So just reach out, we're here to help you get into it if needed. But otherwise, I think I'm going to take the lack of raised hands and unmuting as a sign. And I'm going to say thank you to everyone for a solid morning of learning and investigating the tools that we have available to us as a region, and wish you well on this beautiful day. Thanks again, Christian. Thanks, Civic Mapper. You guys, as always, are my spiritual guide to data. So thank you for that. We'll stay on the line if you end up having a question, but otherwise, have a good day, everyone.